shorter lifespans, cancer,
and higher depression rates.
There's a lot at stake in the daylight savings versus standard time debate. So which is better? Or are you in the category that whichever is fine as long as we don't switch times at all? Whichever you've decided, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. There's an option that makes everyone worth keeping happy. Before getting into that, let's take it back in time. In order to understand the daylight savings or DS time for standard time debate, we must first understand some key concepts with time. Let's first start with solar time. As you may or may not know, the Earth travels around the sun on a tilted axis. If you take a pole, or a sundial if you will, it will cast a shadow. When the shadow makes a complete circle, it will be 360 degrees. It takes about 1 hour for an approximately 15-degree shift. After 24 shifts, 24 hours, you get a complete rotation. 15 times 24 equals 360. Mean solar time is pretty close to what we use now with a few slight adjustments. What we use now is Coordinated Universal Time, or Universal Time, UTC. The UTC map is divided into 24 sections, with the UK as one of the countries under the UTC 0, and every other place measured in deviations from UTC 0. So why do some countries get to be UTC 0 and others have other offsets? Well, because UTC is successor to Greenwich Mean Time, which is the mean solar time at the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, London. So standard time across the world is considered in offsets to universal time. All right, we're now ready to talk about DS for standard time. Before you say which one you prefer, let's settle which one is which. Daylight savings time in the US, starting in mid-March and ends in the first Sunday in November. It's about 65% of the year. During DS time, we spring forward, which means we lose an hour. The sun rises later in the day and you're grumpy going to work, but you're happy because it's sunny in the evening. Standard time in the US begins the first Sunday in November and ends mid-March. It's around 35% of the year. With standard time, we fall back, which means we gain an hour. We get to sleep in more, and it makes it a bit easier to wake up as the sun rises, but we lose an hour of sunlight in the evening.
Here are a set of maps showing the amount of reasonable sunrise and sunset times, depending on whether we change our clocks twice a year or have permanent standard or DS time all year round. If you look at the legend, you can see more yellow equals more reasonable sunrise and sunset times, while purple indicates more days with unreasonable sunrise and sunset times. The first set of maps show what we do now with the change twice a year. There are more unreasonable sunrise times, but the sunsets are later. With standard time all year round, things are a bit more balanced. Particularly in the morning, there are more reasonable sunrise times. This map is also more balanced compared to permanent daylight savings time. With that, things are quite dark in the mornings, and I'll explain why that's bad more later on.
This map is by the talented map maker Andy Woodroff, by the way, who loves daylight savings time. So I'm sorry for using your map to argue against daylight savings time. So you may be wondering, why do we even switch times at all? Where did this idea even come from? Some attribute the changing of times to Ben Franklin in some satirical letter he wrote, but that's not actually it. New Zealand entomologist George Hudson first proposed the modern daylight savings time. He liked to collect insects and got frustrated because dusk came too early in the summer. He wrote a proposal and the rest is history. So DS time was proposed because some guy liked to collect insects. However, there are a lot of corporate interest as to why we maintain DS time in the US today. Retailers like it. More daylight equals more time for people to shop and buy things in the evenings after work. The first and most persistent lobby for daylight savings in this country was the Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce is the largest lobbying organization in the US, representing businesses and various organizations. The golf industry estimated in a hearing to Congress that one additional month of daylight savings time was worth $200 million in additional sales of golf clubs and green fees. The barbecue industry said it was worth $100 million in additional sales of grills and charcoal briquettes. There has been some rhetoric that DS time saves energy, but it's all pretty much a wash. Here are various studies showing that DS time saves either a minuscule amount of energy or, in some cases, increases the amount of energy, such as this Indiana study, which concluded that the daylight savings time increased residential electricity consumption between 1 and 4%. Some of the biggest proponents of DS time are actually the people. People like DS time because they like having more time in the evenings after work to do things such as play sports or hang out with their kids in the park. Standard time aligns better with our circadian rhythm. This is not something you can just shift an hour by drinking some coffee. The body knows and keeps track. Standard time allows more time for the sun to come up and more gently wake us up. Matthew Walker, author of Why We Sleep, also suggests that getting 30 to 40 minutes of sunlight early in the morning not only helps switch on your brain, but also helps you sleep at night. The impacts of sleep are far-reaching across every aspect of our lives, impacting driver safety, cardiovascular disease, weight gain, depression, memory, and so many other factors. Thus, any opportunity to allow people to have more natural sleep patterns, like keeping standard time all year round, has far-reaching personal and arguably legislative significance. Cancer epidemiologists at Harvard and NIH did a study which shows that when the sun comes up later, cancer rates go up by a lot. Reminder, with DS time, the sun comes up later than compared to standard time. In men, 20 minutes of later sunrise gives more stomach, liver, and prostate cancer, as well as more leukemia. In women, the same 20 minutes gives more breast, esophageal, colorectal, lung, and more uterine cancer.
Studies have shown the impact of morning light on depression. Reminder, with standard time, we have more morning light relative to the clock hour. One such study showed the impact of morning versus evening light on winter depression. It concluded that bright light exposure in the morning was recommended for treating seasonal affective disorder.
With all those health impacts, you would think Congress would keep standard time all year round. But nope. In the 70s, Congress passed a bill keeping DS time all year round. There is a bill in Congress right now to keep DS time all year round called the Sunshine Protection Act, proposed by Rubio. It passed the Senate, but is stuck in the House.
From the Sunshine Protection Act, most people think that Congress needs to pass a bill in order for us to not change times twice a year. However, it is important to note that this is misinformation or misrepresentation of the facts. We could do standard time all year round right now, even without additional federal legislation passing. The only thing that needs federal approval is to have permanent DS time. The Uniform Time Act of 1966 allows for permanent standard time all year round as long as the state votes to pass for it. So if you want permanent standard time, reach out to your state representatives.
Now let's go back to what happened when the US tried to pass DS time in the 70s. At the time, 76% of Americans supported permanent DS time. However, just 9 months later, it became so unpopular that President Ford pulled the plug on permanent DST. Pakistan also tried DS time. In fact, they tried 3 times between 2002 and 2009. However, they're currently back on permanent standard time, as switching from standard time to DS time did not have the intended effects with energy savings. Like Pakistan, there are countries that live without the shift DS time. Some notable countries include Iceland, Russia, and China. You may be thinking, I'm clearly a shill for standard time. And you're right. Scientists say it's better, and I don't care about doing anything after work because I'm a couch potato. But DS time, folks, I'm still keeping you in mind with my decision because I'm choosing standard time with the secret option of a shorter work week without docking pay. And that way everybody wins. If the workday was 7 hours, 1 hour short of 8 hours, then everyone can go home an hour early and enjoy that sun that you so love during DS time. People who like standard time get to wake up closer to when it is better for human beings to actually wake up. And corporations, since apparently they're people, still reap an equally and by some estimates an even more productive workforce. So there's no negative impact on shortening the work week. This is actually similar to what happened when Ford shortened the work week from 6 to 5 days a week for increased productivity and more leisure time in order to increase the consumption of goods like vehicles. And I'm not pulling this out of nowhere. There are bills in progress that would allow for a shorter work week. So what I'm saying is, if this is something that's of interest to you, reach out to your representative. Or if you're a person of influence within your own company or own your own company, this is something that you should think about or bring up. The 5-day work week was once thought of as an impossibility. A shorter work week from the 40 hours a week is still a definite possibility. There are 2 bills in progress in the US advocating for a shorter work week. There's the federal bill, 32-hour work week, as well as the California bill, Assembly Bill 2932. They're both pretty similar with some exceptions. The California bill only applies to Californians, and it also only applies to businesses with over 500 employees, while the federal bill applies to all employees. That alone makes the federal bill better. Media often refers to these bills as the 4-day work week bills, but there's nothing in these bills to say that someone must work 4 days a week. What these bills say is that after 32 hours a week, overtime would kick in. In my personal opinion, I can see people working closer to 35 versus 32 hours, at least in the near-term future. There already is a model for a reduced work week without reducing pay that is already in existence. This is in France, in which a 35-hour week bill was passed in early 2000, which states that after 35 hours a week, overtime kicks in. Hourly workers are more likely to work closer to that 35-hour a week mark. People still work over 35 hours a week, but they get overtime. And salaried workers who don't get overtime for going over 35 hours a week often get a higher negotiated amount of rest days or vacation days. There you have it. Standard time with a shorter workday and everybody wins. Reach out to your mom, your friends, and most importantly, your Senate and state representatives to tell them what you want. If you don't want permanent daylight savings time, reach out to your House rep in regards to the Sunshine Protection Act and let them know you're in favor of permanent standard time.
Also, you can reach out to your state representatives about permanent standard time. You don't need to wait on Congress.
If you're in favor of a shorter working day or week with protection for existing wages, then reach out to your representatives about the 32-hour work week bill. And if you're in California in favor of that, you can also reach out regarding the AB 2932 bill.